So, in our series of codependency, there absolutely is the longer it lasts, the worse it gets. There absolutely is, as soon as we start recovery, it gets worse before it gets better. And I want to talk a little bit about a topic. Yep, I'm going to do it. That might cause some of the hair on the back of your neck to stand up a little bit. Yeah. Um, It's not the fun part. I don't know that there is a fun part of codependency, but it's not the fun part to learn about. In fact, it is the section of codependency that I think goes untaught. I don't know that that's a word, but it's an amberism now. That goes untaught or goes um I think a lot of clinicians and a lot of healers hide behind people pleasing. And the neuroscience and the actual part of codependency that brings people into therapy isn't talked about as much because it's scary. And I don't want to share this to scare you. I want to share this because you guys know I got that cheesy mantra, knowledge is power, right? Thank you, PBS Kids. Um, I want to develop a parallel with you. And I'm going to ask that you trust me. And if it gets a little triggering for you, it's okay. Just breathe through it and just do the best you can. So, when you think of someone suffering from substance use disorder, there are some symptoms, characteristics, um, identifying factors that we usually notice. I'm going to text my husband so he can get my girls because they're just going to keep going bonkers. When you think of someone suffering from a substance use disorder, what most of us think about generally, or what's depicted on TV or whatever. Sorry, I can't do two things at once. Is there's a chase. There's a need to control and a need to get what is needed. That could be alcohol, that could be drugs, that could be pills. There is a end in sight and there's a chase in order to get it. And that process, what some might call obsessions and compulsions, that process heightens over time. Meaning some people might say it gets worse, longer lasts, worse it gets. It's insidious. The other thing that shows up outside of the obsessions and compulsions in someone with a substance use disorder is a withdrawal. Someone in this stage isn't using with someone else. They're usually holding it all to themselves. There is no group participation. Like there's no partying happening. And there's usually a shit ton of shit because at this point of a substance use disorder, there's no partying. It's not fun. And this is the part where I said, if you get a little triggered, just try to breathe through it. And I know that I'm asking you for a lot of trust, but I really want to build this and develop this parallel because most people don't realize this. I'm going to make a note. I got mom brain tonight. There's usually some type of consequences. Sometimes that can be drastic, like losing a job, losing a spouse, a partner, losing kids temporarily or permanently. There's pretty big life changes that happens with someone with a substance use disorder that is depicted. And these factors characteristics, descriptions. Do you guys identify those that I can see? Do you guys identify with this? Does this sound familiar to you? Yeah. I want to now describe to you what happens in late stage codependency. There's obsessions and compulsions. There's the need to control someone or something in my life because I've been in survivor mode so long that I feel so powerless that I try to control everything I can. Sometimes that's how the dishes are done. Sometimes it's how the grass is cut or how the house is cleaned. It's obsessions and compulsions that may not make sense to other people and for some reason bring some type of relief to the one suffering from the powerlessness. The longer it lasts, the worse it gets. I've been in survivor mode for so long in late stage codependency that I'm pretty withdrawn and I isolate. I can no longer control my outside world, and so I control it by not being around people. I withdraw, I hold back, I isolate. And at this point, I start to experience consequences. Relationships start changing. Divorce happens, separation happens. Do you notice the parallel that I'm developing? This is why, if you work with a member of my team and you're a member of our community here, this is why we don't identify codependency as anything different than any other numbing and medicating. Because what our culture tends to focus on is the substance, the behavior, or the symptom. All of those things are how we as humans are trying to survive the pain. The root of what our culture calls addiction is trauma. Trauma is unmet emotional needs. Trauma is being raised in chaos and dysfunction. Trauma is maybe a Jerry Springer or Oprah family, maybe a pastor or a politician family. But either way, there's major rigidity that happens. Someone is always there and always on somebody's ass, or someone is never there and the kids raise themselves. That polarization that I'm describing, that is the problem. It becomes about how do I survive? We don't, well, some people might disagree with this, and in no way am I being disrespectful to homes of dysfunction, abuse, or neglect. That's not what I'm trying to do. And we don't live in a jungle. We don't live in tribal society where our life is at risk every single day, but that is exactly how our brains are functioning. The amygdala, that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, that part of our brain that when it's on, our prefrontal cortex is off right here behind our forehead. When that one's driving the bus, we're in survivor mode and we're exhibiting all those late stages. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't really like to hear people call me an addict. When I grew up, an addict was the person under the bridge with the brown paper bag. And a huge purpose, mission, and passion that I have, if you haven't been able to tell, is to educate people on what it actually is. It's me trying to live and survive. It's me using in excess. That's alcohol, that's pills, that's shopping, that's porn, that's sex, that's people pleasing, that's isolation. It's me doing it in excess because at this point it's becoming a detriment to me and or a detriment to someone else. Does that sound familiar? When we talk about numbing and medicating, whether you've been in a workshop group or in here, I've talked before about intentional numbing. That means there's no harm to me and there's no harm to anyone else. I'm not spinning out. I'm aware that I'm overstimulated or past my point, and I'm going to watch 3 episodes of Vampire Diaries. I don't know why, it's just my latest thing. So When we think about, and I can draw a whole map for you of this, but when you look at late stage codependency and when you look at substance use disorder requiring higher level of care, the symptomology is the same. Yeah, just breathe that in for a minute. I don't say that to scare you. I say that to validate you. Because when you started working with a member of my team, whether that's been a while back, whether you've come back because your recovery has brought you back, or whether you're just starting, there's a shit ton of pain that brought you here. And I'm saying this to validate you. And there's so much red tape and politics that prevent real recovery from happening. Because if you didn't know this, codependency is not a diagnosis according to the DSM. It's not. And that's bullshit in my judgment and opinion. And it's what so many of us suffer from. When we enter into recovery, you'll hear, if recovery is new for you, you'll hear me or someone else, a fellow traveler, say, I'm in recovery with my codependency. I'm in recovery with my perfectionism. And what that means is it doesn't go away. It's a part of who I am genetically, cellularly, behaviorally, and I'm spending the rest of my life choosing to not live that way. Much like the way the world looks at someone with a substance use disorder. There is no hierarchy of what our culture calls addiction, whether it's codependency, whether it's alcoholism, all of the isms. There's no hierarchy of which one is worse. I have a judgment about it, and you might not like it. Substance use disorders create a physical dependence, a chemical dependence, physical dependence, and sometimes a psychological dependence. Those dependencies are to a substance or an inanimate object. My dependency is to a person, a loved one, someone that my brain, my body, and my soul tells me I'll do whatever it takes to save their life. That's codependency. So for me, watching my dad really disintegrate in front of me most of my life was training on how do I save everyone around me? What do I need to do? Dump out the bottles. Like all the wrong things for the right reasons. And when we think of codependency, we're not talking about an inanimate object. Many of us are talking about a spouse or a parent or a child. And I don't know about you, but there's not a whole lot I wouldn't do in that situation. And then when you add disease on top of it, obsessions, compulsions, powerlessness, control, yeah, it gets to feeling pretty crazy. So those late stage behaviors look like avoidance. Those late stage behaviors look like, how can I control my world because I just can't stand the way the person next to me is clicking that fucking pen. Like when a pen makes me just want to come out of my chair and start cussing at someone. That's totally not my character. I joke about it, but I know when I'm in that state, I'm not okay. My capacity is much more expansive than that. And when my fuse feels this long, something's wrong. I'm not okay. Codependency for many of us is not about a loss of identity. Codependency for many of us is about living without an identity. And recovery is about finally choosing to be worthy enough to deserve an identity. That's a pretty big deal. And it's pretty hard fucking work. So I say that too to really validate recovery is not for the weak. It's not. It is for the badass. It is for the people that are willing, that in our state of pathology, dis-ease or disease, we learned what endure means. We learned what I'm capable of means. And recovery teaches me just because I'm capable of it, sure as hell does not mean I'm supposed to be doing it. But it starts to teach me what the gray area is and not live in the all or nothing, the black or the white. That polarized mentality where there's only two solutions that can be right. It's a setup. So when you think about late stage codependency, the avoidance, the isolation, the withdrawal, the numbing and the medicating, trying to just get a sense of peace, a break, or contentment, it's what brings most of us in. So I'm going to ask you to take a deep breath. If that is new information for you, I want to ask that you take it back to your therapist, take it back to my team, um, and get them to shed some more light on it. Or if you disagree, great, disagree. That's a good thing. And don't own something that's not part of your story. This is only some narrative to help you connect the dots of how it shows up for you. I don't want all of it to fit. And most of us land somewhere on this continuum. Much like substance use disorders, much like AA and NA, if you have ever been in those rooms, what you'll hear is some of us are sicker than others, and we keep coming back. So I hope this was helpful for you. I'm going to share the tools at the end, but I'm going to stop recording. The tool for tonight, I want to speak into, if you haven't heard this, I want to invite you to try it, adopt it. Yeah, just see how it shows up for you. Just because I'm recovering from codependency and I don't get to live a part of my life without it does not mean that I'm suffering from it. When we talk about recognizing my level of pathology, recognizing my level of disease, and recognizing my level of recovery, just making sure I have as much recovery as pathology. And the goal is to be higher, right? This is an amberism, so don't Google this. I believe that recovery gives us the gift of awareness. If you think back to a time before recovery for you, I want you to witness yourself back in that time before recovery, and I want you to notice how much self-awareness you had. Just think about that for a second. How much self-awareness did you have before recovery? I can speak into the eye and say I had absolutely zero. Because with an external locus of control, my life depended on me pleasing people. Otherwise, there was punitive consequences. I was trained to make sure people outside of me were content, happy, and had what they needed. That's why I was such a good chameleon. It's also why I never had an identity until I got into recovery, because I was born a codependent. And I don't speak that lightly. And I'm grateful for the 17 years of recovery that's given me the gift of self awareness. Because when I can be self aware, lizard brain's off. Mhm. Prefrontal cortex is on logic, decision making, and analyzing. That's the part of my brain, whether I suffer from addiction, substances, behavior, numbing, medicating. This is the part of the brain that goes off and the lizard brain comes on. When I have self awareness, I am not surviving. I am not in lizard brain. When I can own, am I think I'm in fucking end stage codependency. Well, you're right, sweetheart, but guess what? Your eyes are wide open. And it sounds so glim and dark, end stage codependency. That's not my term. That's what you're going to read in a lot of books on codependency. And much like anything else, the numbing and medicating, there's this imaginary line that when I do it in excess, when I'm isolating in excess, believe it or not, most people don't believe this. I'm an introvert. I only show up this way with my people, with recovery people. That's because I feel safe. And I also couldn't do this every day. Thursday night is very special to me. Like, I save energy for this because this is one of my meetings for the week. And I get so much from you guys too. And I'm an introvert. I recharge by being alone. That's not bad or wrong. When I do it in excess, though, I'm very well aware that I'm doing it in excess. You want to know why? Because I start self-shaming. I start judging. Mhm. So I want to offer you two things. One is an Al-Anon belief, principle, saying, mantra. I can't control it. I sure as fuck didn't cause it, and I'm not going to apologize for that one. And I can't cure it. Much like someone with diabetes, you can put their favorite dessert pie in front of them, their mouth is going to salivate. It is, because we're human. It isn't that we aren't human. It's that we make sure that what I'm navigating in my world and relationally, how I show up in my world, does not make me abandon me. Period. We have to learn how to do that. We weren't taught that. We weren't modeled that. Cellularly, that's not showing up in our DNA. We have to create it, which is really hard. And the way that we do that, this might surprise you because it sounds so simple, and it's not. If you go back to first starting in the rooms, most people have the same experiences. But the way that we do that is by no longer enduring. We don't do what we're capable of anymore. We no longer endure. We do something called feeling to heal. We grieve. We tell our stories. We color ourselves in with the reality of what we survived. Because that was my story, and I am not my story. I'm Amber. I am not my story. Thank goodness. I don't save everyone because I don't have any fucking power over that. But what I do have is the ability to share my story, feel my feelings, because what I was taught was not to do that. And what I do now is I cry when I need to cry, whether I'm angry, pissed, or sad, tears come out. I don't have control over it. But being able to feel is what lets me heal. So if that's the emotional sobriety stage that you're in, congratulations, because that's really high level recovery. You can also be in stage codependency and high level recovery at the same fucking time. Don't know if you knew that or not, but you can. In recovery, if you think of a number line, if you're with me, you know what this means, but I'm going to try to describe it for those that haven't experienced it. I put a number line on the floor, 1 through 10. Pathology is about, yeah, pathology is about living on the 10 and living on the 1 and never getting to walk in the middle. So recovery is what allows me to walk up and down the 1 and 10. There's no rule in any recovery book that says I stand on the 5 every day. That's not even realistic. Recovery is not always being in the gray. Recovery is recognizing when I'm not. Recovery is recognizing when my body is not okay, my little girl isn't okay, or my little boy isn't okay, and I then do something to support them. And now I'm regulated, all maybe within the same hour, within the same day, versus living decades in survival. That's recovery. So it is that gift of self-awareness that I get to see and feel where I am. Because if my body wasn't telling me I'm pissed, I wouldn't know I deserve better. So those that are angry today, congratulations. You recognize your worth. And I just want to invite you into that. Anger is a secondary emotion, but it also helps us recognize I deserve better than this. I'm worth more than this. And it's also why we choose to live in recovery for the rest of our life, because we do deserve more than this. And there are more, for me, more good days, more better days than not. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. I hope that even though I asked you to trust me because I knew that I could bring it full circle, and our stories are full circle, right? They're real, they're painful. And if I can't be in my pain and bring myself full circle, I'll keep numbing and medicating. So just make sure that you are gentle tonight. Make sure that you recognize if you're still triggered and take care of your body. Take some deep breaths or sit with your dog or your cat. They're really good at regulating nervous systems. And just be with some permission to just feel. Okay? Thank you for showing up tonight for me. Thank you for showing up for you and each other.